Good morning, everyone. We're just going to give a moment for everyone to get in here, and then we will get started with today's webinar. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So thank you all for joining us today for Taunton Survivors Collective, a collaboration centering BIPOC-identified sexual assault survivors. We are thrilled to have Christine Gaze from New Hope, April Funches from the Taunton Diversity Network, and Chastity Bowick from Collective Capacity Consulting here to present this training. My name is Charlotte Hoff. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the manager of administration here at MOVA. I'm just going to go over some logistics quickly before passing it over to our presenters. This is a Zoom webinar, so you cannot be seen or heard as audience members, but you can see the presenters, ASL interpreters, and presentation. If you have questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A function found at the bottom of the Zoom screen to ask them. We will pause periodically throughout the presentation to answer questions. We do have ASL interpretation and CART captioning available during today's session. To see the closed captions, you can go to the bottom of the Zoom screen, click on the up arrow next to closed caption, and choose Show Subtitle. If you are having trouble seeing the ASL interpreters or closed captions or have any other tech issues today, please use the chat function to message all panelists, and we will happily assist you. I will now pass it over to Christine, Chastity, and April. Thank you for joining us today.
Great. Thank you so much, Charlotte. I do want to thank Charlotte, Brenna, and Amanda for assisting us today, along with Deb and Shanice, who are providing our ASL interpretation this morning, and Lisa, who is helping us with the CART captioning. I want to welcome everyone today to our presentation. And I am thankful for MOVA, who has invited us to come out and talk about the work that we are doing in Taunton, Massachusetts. My name is Christine Gaze. I use she, her pronouns, and I work at New Hope, Inc., which is a sexual and domestic violence agency that spans 41 communities in southeastern and south central Massachusetts. Joining me today is Chastity Bowick, who is the founder of Chastity's Consulting and Talent Group, and April Funches, who is the founder and CEO of Taunton Diversity Network. So we wanted to open up our presentation today with a poll, and there are a couple of ways to access it. At the top, you could see a QR code to your right. There's also text capability as well as web access to be able to enter in your answers. So what I will do is I will read the question, and then I will walk you through how you can answer if you want to use the text function with your cell phone. Otherwise, you can use the QR code or web address to access this poll and select your answer. So the question today that we're starting with is, if you are involved in the sexual or domestic violence movement, how long have you been involved with it? So there are 5-digit numbers next to each answer. So if you are using your cell phone, you can send that code to number 22333 and it will show the answers. So let's see how we're doing. We have quite a few folks who have been in the movement for 1 to 5 or 6 to 10 years, which is fantastic. Thank you so much for your work. So again, my name is Christine Gaze. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Director of Community Impact and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at New Hope, Inc. As I mentioned before, Chastity is a consultant at Chastity's Consulting and Talent Group in collaboration with Collective Capacity Consulting. And we'll talk a little bit about that collaboration later. And April is the co-founder and president of the Taunton Diversity Network. We all use she, her pronouns. So as I mentioned about New Hope, we are a nonprofit organization. We were founded in 1979 by Edith Palmer. Edith Palmer got a group of her friends together in Attleboro, Massachusetts, and decided that there needed to be some kind of hotline for domestic violence survivors. And from that effort, we've grown into the organization we are today. We are building an anti-violence movement in Massachusetts to end sexual and domestic violence and create communities where folks can survive, thrive, and live to their full potential. We all know someone affected by sexual and domestic violence, and it is our goal to do the work that we need to do to hopefully become obsolete, that there's no violence in this world, to be having to have agencies like New Hope. One thing I also want to acknowledge as well is that sexual and domestic violence does not discriminate. All people of all identities are survivors of sexual and domestic violence. For New Hope, again, we serve 41 communities in southeastern and south central Massachusetts. In the teal part, it represents our sexual assault services and our domestic violence services. And when we talk about sexual assault services, it means that we provide medical advocacy support to sexual assault survivors who are admitted in the emergency rooms after a sexual assault at Morton Hospital in Taunton and at Sturdy Hospital in Attleboro. In the purple is where we provide solely domestic violence services. So our agency in its entirety goes all the way to southeastern Massachusetts, to Taunton and even past Taunton, and then all the way to the west in Southbridge and Sturbridge. And then we also provide some services in Worcester, which I will speak about later. We want everyone to know that survivors of all identities are welcome. We do not ask for immigration status, and we also provide language access through our language line. So here are some of the services that New Hope offers. Primarily, we have a 24-hour hotline, which is also a helpline. It is staffed by both Spanish and English speakers, and that hotline number is 800-323-HOPE. It is there 24/7, 365. When someone calls there, they will be immediately connected to an advocate. The other thing that we offer is a confidential emergency shelter for individuals and families. Currently, we have 2 shelters that we are operating, but the exciting news is that we are in the process of building a brand new shelter that will provide a residence for 14 families, and that will be for anyone living in that 41 community area. We provide counseling for all ages. We have a dedicated children's counselor, and we also provide counseling for adults. In Worcester, we have 2 things. We have a visitation center, which provides supervised visitation options for non-custodial parents. And then we also house our RESPECT, our Intimate Partner Abuse Prevention Education Program. And that is a program for people who cause harm in their relationships. It is a 40+ week training that people get to really talk through behaviors, talk through their value systems, and it really helps to prevent future violence in relationships. We've found that many of the folks who are involved in our RESPECT and an Intimate Partner Abuse Prevention Education Program are often survivors themselves. And so we want to do a good job of being able to support them to have healthy relationships in the future. Our housing stabilization program is an opportunity for people who may not have housing and may not be able to reside in a shelter to be able to have some kind of transitional housing to eventually move into a permanent housing option. Our SAFE Plan advocates provide court advocacy for abuse and harassment prevention orders. So if someone enters a courthouse where SAFE Plan is available, our advocates will walk through the whole process with the person, help with the paperwork, and stand alongside them in front of the judge in order to be able to help them get an order from the judge. As I mentioned before, we provide SANE medical advocacy to Morton Hospital in Taunton and Sturdy Hospital in Attleboro. We have community-based advocacy services. So oftentimes survivors will find themselves in situations where they need a lot of different kinds of support. Maybe they need help with food. Maybe they need help with gas for their car, for repairs for their vehicle, for public transportation. Our community-based advocates can help with those needs. We also have civilian police advocacy, which means that we have advocates in 2 police stations who help follow up to domestic violence situations and really help connect survivors with the resources that they need in order to thrive. And lastly, our prevention, education, and outreach team goes out into our communities and they provide trainings, they provide tabling events, and they go out into the community to educate people about New Hope, about domestic violence, and also about sexual violence, as well as human trafficking. I want to mention that all of our services are free, with the exception of the RESPECT program. RESPECT is a sliding scale based fee system, but every other service that we offer is offered for free. And I'll turn it over to Chastity.
Thank you, Christine. Good morning, everyone. Just want to give you a little bit more background about Chastity's Consulting and Talent Group. And our mission is twofold, which is to invest in the future, success, and leadership of transgender and gender expansive communities, with an emphasis of transgender women of color, while also educating and transforming businesses and organizations to weave the community into the fabric of society. We empower transgender individuals with an emphasis, again, on trans women of color to learn the skills and tools necessary to move into stability while advocating for and with our communities in a variety of settings. And thinking about intersectionality, that really dictates how we are able to move throughout society. And as a Black trans woman who has experienced sexual and domestic violence, it is important that I assist in this movement, as there are not enough culturally specific resources for Black, Indigenous, people of color survivors. And my story is all too often within the trans community. Just to give you more history, as a survivor, when I was trying to seek services, number one, I wasn't seen as a woman. Number two, I wasn't seen as a Black person. I was just seen as a part of a community that society wants to erase. And so I think it's very important that I assist in this movement because, like Christine said in the beginning, domestic violence and sexual assault does not exempt anybody because of their identity. And so it happens to a lot of different people, regardless of their background. And we should have the resources there to assist us as well.
All right, so I'm happy to jump right in. April Funches with the Taunton Diversity Network. The Taunton Diversity Network started in June of 2020 after we attended a peaceful protest when the killing of George Floyd happened. There were a group of us that felt very passionate about continuing to do additional work in the Taunton community and possibly beyond, just because we saw so many inequalities happening in our area. We saw that there were a lot of areas of need for change. And so we just felt compelled to make it more than just showing up one time for a protest. We felt like we needed to make this a more permanent movement. So we decided to start the Taunton Diversity Network, and we are heading into 4 years strong so far. Probably about 2 years ago, the former executive director of New Hope approached the Taunton Diversity Network because I also sit on the New Hope board of directors, and she let us know about some opportunities that were coming up, that we could potentially partner on some things, just based off of the work that TDN has been doing to really address diversity, equity, and inclusion, and address a lot of different social justice issues. There was certainly an opportunity there for, some partnerships and collaboration with New Hope. So we were excited to be a part of this initiative. And as you can see in the photo here, this is from our most recent domestic violence vigil that we have every October. And it was a event that was happening long before we started the Taunton Diversity Network. And the founder of that event actually decided that when we started, she said, this is now your generation's time to shine. And I want you all to carry the torch from now on about making sure that people are well aware of how things like these tragic events are happening in our communities. And so we have carried that torch ever since, literally and figuratively, since 2020.
So here we are with another poll question. It's the same process. And the question here is, if you are involved in the sexual or domestic violence movement, what is the main reason why you decided to be involved in this work as a career? You could be a survivor, family, friends are survivors, might have general interest in the work. It's a requirement as part of my career. No specific reason, it just provides me with some income, or it's an opportunity to provide social justice advocacy. So I'll pause for about a minute and let the responses generate. So it looks overwhelmingly like folks who are in the work just had a general interest in the work. We have some folks who are survivors, and then also some who have family and friends who are survivors. And so thank you so much for your involvement in this movement. It is hard work, but we're happy to be doing this work alongside of you. So we want to tell you a little bit about the background on this project. Oops, for some reason, here we go. It is a three-year collaborative grant funded by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health. It started in 2022 and will end in late 2025. And basically, the request for proposals wanted there to be collaborations between agencies and a community-based organization. And as April mentioned, we ended up reaching out to the Taunton Diversity Network as our collaborative agency to be able to do this work out into the Taunton community. We picked Taunton Diversity Network, obviously, because they were based in Taunton, but because of their desire to center and uplift the diversity in Taunton. And it just intersected very well with what we were trying to accomplish by being able to center BIPOC-identified sexual assault survivors. And at the beginning, what we were trying to do was do this work and benefit women and children who identified as Black. And over time, it ended up expanding into what it is now, which is to serve all BIPOC-identified sexual assault survivors in Taunton. Ultimately, what we'd like to do from this project is to fund a part-time bilingual bicultural advocate who would be able to provide support to this community. And the way we've decided to move forward in this project in order to figure out the responsibilities and the scope of this advocate is to undergo a community needs assessment, which we'll be talking about later.
And I guess later is now.
Yes.
Yeah, so the Community Needs Assessment, which is sponsored by New Hope and Taunton Diversity Network, is aimed to improve the community's response to sexual violence and make resources and support more accessible to Black, Indigenous, people of color survivors. They share a deep commitment to supporting BIPOC survivors and are invested in the community of Taunton, embracing the values of collaboration, anti-racism, and trust. Their hope is to create a more unified response to sexual violence. And so when we think about collaboration, this is to ensure survivors have full access to support. We need to make sure we are doing things outside the box and going to people in the community, aka, again, meeting people where they are. And anti-racism. To end sexual violence, we must take active steps to dismantle racism and other forms of oppression that create systemic barriers. An example of a systemic barrier is, for example, every different communities, different cultural backgrounds respond differently when the police comes after a DV or SA situation, right? And so majority of Black women, some of us respond, we're angry, we're upset, and then we are being looked at as we are the aggressor after we were just attacked. And so it's things that education that needs to be provided to understand that every community, different communities are going to react different when they're being assaulted. And so that cannot make us a victim because we're upset and we're irate, and rightfully so. And then also trust. To improve access to services and support for BIPOC survivors, we must actively engage in community partners and survivors. And so some of the goals and objectives of this community assessment is to understand the needs of BIPOC survivors in Taunton, create trust among community and system partners to strengthen the community's response to sexual violence, identify and remove barriers to accessing resources and support for BIPOC survivors, to create and/or amplify existing culturally specific resources and support for BIPOC survivors experiencing sexual violence, and reduce isolation by destigmatizing sexual violence. And some of our objectives are to understand assets and barriers related to survivors accessing services and support, and to increase access to and awareness of culturally specific resources and supports, and to decrease the barriers of reporting incidents of sexual violence. And overall, for me, the community assessment is very important. It's because regardless of our experience as being survivors or history with doing this work, things change. What survivors need change over time. And so to keep our ear to the ground, I feel like community assessments are very important because we need to hear from the community about what they want. And so we can execute the funding properly.
So we are back to another survey question. And what we'd like to know is if you are involved in culturally specific work. And I'll pause for just a couple of seconds as we have the answers generate. Wow, so many of you who are on this call today are involved in culturally specific work, which is fantastic. And even if you are not currently involved in culturally specific work, I believe that there may be opportunities to collaborate in the future. And, we'd love the opportunity to speak with you further about some potential opportunities where we could work together in that regard. All right. So a little bit about Taunton, and we'll have April talk about that since she is a resident.
Former resident, but I'm
Former
always
resident,
there.
sorry.
I always say I just sleep where I live. I am always in Taunton. So this is a little bit of kind of the makeup of the population in Taunton. One thing I can say for sure is that when we first came to Taunton in the very early 90s, the percentage of African Americans or even Hispanic populations that were there were a lot less than they are now. But what I can say is that the population has really changed. It's definitely become a melting pot of different types of cultures and backgrounds. And so with that being said, what we encountered when we first started the Taunton Diversity Network there were a lot of folks who transitioned from whatever communities, whether it was in Boston or New York or from other countries that came in, and they were like, we don't see other people that look like us, and we don't see, a place where we feel comfortable being ourselves, being people of color, being Black women, being Black men. And so as you can see, with it being, 77% a white population, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for people of color to really kind of come together and congregate. So the first attempt that we had with kind of working on this project, as I said, when we pulled the Taunton Diversity Network together, we did have a lot of people that reached out, and they were, very interested in finding out what we were doing. And so when this opportunity came to us, it was said that we wanted to do, this project, and we were going to start really working on, providing some resources and support along with some outreach around sexual assault for Black women and girls. And so we began with an intern who was a law student who was super passionate about sexual assault and domestic violence. She actually was working with an organization out of Rhode Island. And it wasn't 100% clear as to what we were doing, but we were like, all right, we got to collect this information, because it was our understanding that the report rates among Black survivors were much lower than our white counterparts. And for that reason, there was kind of some question marks, right, going around. As Chastity stated, oftentimes Black women are considered to be, angry or very, aggressive in some senses. And so to know that the report rates were much lower, we're definitely questioning, like, well, why is that? It isn't that it's not happening in our communities and in our populations. So we were trying to look a little further into it. So the intern that we had thought, let's look at some case studies. Let's try to get some information in that sense. One thing that we did kind of discover when trying to gather some information between the police departments and the DA's office that I used to work for, we did find that most of the time when they're capturing data for these cases, they're not necessarily listing the identity as far as their racial background for these individuals who are survivors. They just had, the basic information about a case. So that posed a little bit of a challenge for us, because we didn't really know where to start. And it definitely made it a little bit, difficult to figure out exactly where are we looking to outreach to these populations. So again, I had to going back into my own head, and I'm thinking, well, where do you see people, Black people or people of color the most? You see them in churches, you see them at laundromats, you see them in grocery stores, the hair salons, nail salons. Those are the places that I know that I will see these populations and these individuals. But that's not a place that you can necessarily always have these kinds of difficult conversations. And so, through the community connections and the collaborations that we have through the Taunton Diversity Network, we attempted to do some outreach in different places to different audiences in various ways, but our intern did end up leaving to go to a different law school out of state. And then it created a situation to where we just were trying to kind of play catch up on some things and really weren't sure what direction we were going in.
I do want to mention a little bit about the organizational piece of our first attempt. So as far as staffing was concerned, because the ultimate goal was to hire an advocate, this project sat with the counseling and advocacy team and that director who was supporting that team. And at the time, I was hired to do diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And there wasn't a recognition at that time that some of this work should fall under that because it dealt with a culturally specific population. It was a brand new role that I had taken on in DEI, and there was still a lot of confusion and lack of clarity as far as where the lines were drawn as far as what my work would entail. I think most of us know now that DEI work encompasses all aspects of an organization. And, you know, that is definitely something that we're working to do now. But at the very start, when my position was created, there wasn't clarity as far as kind of where I would be involved when it came to certain culturally specific work and programs. So then we move on to attempt 2. So April talked a little bit about some of the challenges that we had, and we recognized that not only did we need to center Black women and children in Taunton who are sexual assault survivors, but really a lot of the barriers that we were seeing applied to people who identified as Black, Indigenous, people of color. And we also wanted to recognize too that not all sexual assault survivors are women. And so we decided to expand our scope and our activities. And so we ended up doing an expansion to our target group. And at that point, the question was, well, how do we determine what the needs are for those sexual assault survivors? We can do research, but it seems like the research is limited. We could go and talk to some community members, but a lot of people who were in the higher ups in different community-based organizations were white. And we wanted to make sure that we were encompassing and thinking about every single factor that might create a barrier for someone to be able to report and receive services and support around sexual assault. And it's because of that that I reached out to Collective Capacity Consulting. And then they connected me with 2 team members, and then a 3rd member was Chastity, who we have today. And we contracted with them to begin a community needs assessment, which is currently underway. So the way we decided to approach this is that TDN, led by April, was going to lead the outreach piece. And then we would be the project lead, and also we would be the primary manager of the finance piece. So the financial accounting, the distribution of funds, and then all the reporting that is required by us by the grant. So that's how we decided to structure it, and it's definitely worked out a lot better. There's definitely much more clarity, but also with our community needs assessment, there have been some challenges along the way. And we will talk about that later in this presentation. Now, as far as the community needs assessment is concerned, we have 2 options available. There's an online survey option, and we've also distributed paper surveys. These surveys would take about 8 minutes for someone to be able to complete from start to finish. And we're not exclusively getting information just from those surveys. We are also offering the option to do interviews with community providers and other survivors, and then also put together some focus groups for people to be able to share their experiences. And here we are with the challenges. So April, do you want to talk a little bit about, you spoke a little bit about some of the expectations in the beginning. Can you expand a little bit on that experience?
Yeah. So again, we were, I think we were all just excited to be able to do some work in this area. So we kind of just like jumped right in, forgetting all the rules that we've ever known on how to start a project in the beginning. So it wasn't really clear to TDN and maybe even, you know, some folks that even knew Hope as to how we should go about, you know, this project and the expectations as to, you know, what we were supposed to do as the community partner. We just knew that we needed to do some outreach and kind of let people know about this partnership and potentially find, you know, some survivors to help support. But there wasn't a clear understanding as to like even our role with, you know, within our collaboration with New Hope in providing them with some support around, you know, DEI issues and social justice issues. So that was one thing that we kind of learned in this second go round, because when we finally did have a conversation with Christine and Deanna, and it was like, oh, well, these are some of the things you guys are supposed to be also assisting with. And we're like, oh, we didn't even know that. So we had to play catch up with some of that. And then the frequency and staff turnover. So as I said, our intern ended up leaving and going out of state. So then we had to find someone else. So we did hire a part-time outreach coordinator, and she was great for a short period of time, but then had some other family commitments, couldn't stay on. The individual who was working with New Hope to do potentially the counseling side of things also had some things that came up that changed her role, and she wasn't able to continue. So it's almost like as soon as we started to get a little bit of momentum and making community connections and trying to establish relationships and partnerships, then we would lose staff. And then it's like, okay, now we have to start from scratch all over again. So it got a little frustrating, I'm sure, on both ends. And we just wanted to really get the work done. And again, like I said, some of the rules went out the window with as far as like really doing the community needs assessment, which I know we probably should have done in the beginning, but you know, not really thinking things through in the initial part and just really wanted to jump right into the work. We kind of got to, you know, a setback a little bit with that. And then the buy-in from the community, as you can imagine, sexual assault is probably not the sexiest subject that you really want to address when you're coming into a meeting, and not everybody's like, yeah, let's do it. You know, they're hesitant. They're, you know, they're a little bit shy about it maybe. So you know, when we're coming to people saying, hey, we want to do an assessment, we want to talk to some people, we want to send out a survey, you know, nobody's really banging down your door to say that we want to participate in this. You know, folks are kind of like, oh yeah, okay, another survey or another assessment. But also one thing that we know about Taunton, which is why we were thrilled to be a part of this project, is that, and this may be the same in other communities too, but I'm just speaking about Taunton, you know, they can be very like territorial with things, and very much like a small town feel in a big city. So to share, you know, contacts, connections, information, you know, for some reason, there have been some community partners, or we don't even call community connectors or whatever, that really were hesitant. They actually gave us like a little bit of like pushback at a meeting when we were saying we want to share this survey with, you know, your clients or different people that are in your office. Can you please share it? And we're trying to pass things around the table. And there was one individual that literally stopped passing the paperwork around the table and held it because they didn't want it to get passed around. And then they literally said, oh, well, you can't pass around that survey in this meeting. I'm like, yeah, we can, because it's an open meeting. We can do that. So even if we're not taking time from your meeting, it can be still passed around, which we found very strange. But, you know, needless to say, the work continues on regardless of those, you know, small little barriers, because we laugh at those kinds of things. At least in TDN we do. So I think that, like I said, the good thing about us being a part of this collaboration is the fact that oftentimes we don't take no for an answer very easily. So that piece with the buy-in from some community partners, fine, we'll move on to the next one. I did kind of talk a little bit about the stigma around discussing sexual assault and domestic violence. You know, it's either a mixed bag. You'll either get some people that are like, oh yes, absolutely, like, let me get this to everyone that I know, or you get some people that'll kind of give you the soft yes, but you know they're really not going to do much about it. Because again, this is, you know, it's kind of a taboo topic. It's a subject matter that not everyone feels comfortable with, and whether it's because they've experienced it themselves, or they know friends or family members that have experienced it. Maybe they're on the other end of it. Maybe they, you know, they're on the end of the side of they're maybe an abuser. Who knows? We never know. But we just don't always get the most warm reception around it, but we know that we still need to continue to try to have these conversations. And, you know, sharing the survey with as many organizations as possible. Chastity and I have been doing some like in-person kind of street outreach opportunities where we're, you know, literally just going business to business and door to door to anybody that we think would be willing to post a survey flyer, would be willing to share it with their clients or whoever, just to say, you know, we got to get this out there and, you know, get some folks to really respond so we can get a better picture on how do we reach people, what are the needs, what are the barriers, you know, what are some of the things that we're missing, that again, research and other data has not shown yet.
Right. And as April said, there's times when situations like we experienced at that meeting can be so discouraging, but Chastity had pointed out too that that's good data for us to have, right? So we wouldn't ordinarily think of it in that way, but then it helped really change my my mind and really my mindset over, you know, these experiences that we're having. What has been frustrating too is not only did we have that situation where we're trying to pass these flyers around, but at the same time, we even tried to email to different groups and ask them to distribute the survey. And even when we did that, we got very little in return in terms of responses. So it has been a tough road. It doesn't mean that we're going to ever give up. We are determined to make sure that we are centering sexual assault survivors who identify as BIPOC, and we'll just keep going no matter what barriers are in the way. So before I get to what's ahead, I did want to mention that, you know, there was a lack of clarity in the beginning. There was a change of staffing, and then I ended up on the project as the New Hope lead. And this was right before we started the community needs assessment. And it was so important to me and our CEO, Deanna, that we have the community tell us what they needed in an advocate. What does that look like? What should the responsibilities be? We really wanted to do a good job of scoping that out. So, you know, and on the one hand, of course, we want to get an advocate out there right away. We want to be able to help this population. But at the same time, it wouldn't make sense for us to go in and hire an advocate and not really know kind of the approach that that person should take, and not really know the ways that we're expecting this person to support the community. So while it has taken a while, and this CNA is taking a number of months and will be extended into the summertime, we hope that ultimately this information will be able to help us with this advocacy position and also with all the work that we decide to do in Taunton. We have an office in Taunton, and we would very much like to make sure that everyone who needs access to services and support through New Hope can get it. And so it's our goal ultimately to grow the Taunton office based on the information that we're receiving from this community needs assessment. So while it was targeted for this advocacy position, there are definitely some long-term effects in a positive way that this will have on the way that we're staffing and really looking strategically for our agency. So what's ahead is the data that we're receiving from the CNA will inform our approach moving forward. So what is that going to look like? What does this advocate, what will this advocate do? Where is this advocate going to be based? Do we have to have a more community-based setting rather than in an office? What are the services and supports that we really need our advocate to hone in on to be able to support this community? And then the other part of it is to talk about the community investments. And April, I was just wondering if you can expand on that a little bit more.
Sure. Oh, I'm thinking I'm still on mute, child. Sorry. So some of the community investments that we have going on, obviously our office space is, we're hoping, going to be a community type space so that people can come. We've got some technology that we put in the office so we can offer webinars in larger capacity, or so that we can have people come and have groups if need be, just because of the nature of the work that New Hope does. I think that it's important that their office kind of stays a little bit secluded in a sense for the protection of the folks that they serve. So being able to offer another space that would be open for the community would be pretty awesome. I mean, we have really great connections and collaborations with the public schools as well as the vocational high school, all of the after school programs that service most of the students in the city. We have great community connections as well. And so, for the most part, those people that we've already had those connections with are on board to assist in any way that they can, and support the project in any way that they can. So that's been huge for us and will be huge for us, because I foresee that that's going to end up being very useful in the future moving forward once this assessment is complete and we're ready to kind of put some plans into action.
Thank you. So now we're opening it up to any questions or comments about this project or about this presentation.
If folks have questions, you can drop them in the Q&A. And as we wait for some to come in, I will just thank all three of you, Christine, April, and Chastity, for presenting and sharing sort of your journey to get here, all the work that you have done together, the challenges. I think that those are always helpful to hear about, even when it seems like, everything is going great. There were bumps along the way, and the work moving forward is really interesting to hear about as well. So I just wanted to start by thanking all three of you for sharing the work that you all have done.
Well, thank you so much, Charlotte. Yeah, I mean, I think any project has its challenges, and I think especially with culturally specific work, when there isn't a specific roadmap, can be even more challenging. And then especially then doing it in Taunton with the way that the culture is, was really opened our eyes to a lot of things. I think we expected some things, but we didn't expect other things. And, we just kind of roll with it and problem solve and just plugging through and hoping to reach the end with what we're hoping to accomplish.
Yeah. And then just to add to that too, so one of the things that I didn't really mention, when we started the Taunton Diversity Network, we had a really heavy focus, and we still do have a very heavy focus on civic engagement. And so we have an initiative called the Fill the Seats Initiative, where we go to City Council every Tuesday and we just sit in and listen in on the sessions and just really try to keep the public updated on when there may be an opportunity that they need to participate in public input or get involved in certain action items. And we did have a moment in time where some of the city councilors were trying to get rid of public input, and we did a little silent protest in the city hall and contacted the ACLU and had to kind of let folks know, we're not going to stop exercising our rights as citizens. And it's very important that the public is involved and engaged in different topic matters in the city, as the councilors and representatives even for the state, y'all, they work for us. So we definitely plan to, if it comes to that, once we figure out what the assessment says, we definitely plan to participate in any advocacy efforts that come about from this community assessment. Maybe there's some policy change that needs to happen, and we're all gung-ho for supporting any kind of policy, legislation, anything that comes about that's going to create long-term sustainable change. It's not just about like, well, let's put a little band-aid on a situation or just patch the project. That's not what we're looking to do. We're looking to hopefully create something that's going to be long-term and sustainable, and it's really going to help these individuals that we've been discussing today.
And that's why that type of advocacy is so important, because we already know there's a lack of funding when it comes to these types of services that we're advocating for, but the people who put the budget in place, we put in office. So it's very important that we advocate for the funding that is needed to continue this important work. And if the people in office are not giving us the funding that we need, that's when we advocate our communities to get someone else in office. So I think it's a multitude of ways that we have to be involved when doing this work, beyond just the advocacy part for the individuals. We have to advocate for funding and resources as well.
The other thing too, I think I would love to see come out of this project is maybe even changing some mindsets around things, especially in the Black community. I remember even just dealing with something small as like, whether it was a fight with a classmate or something. And when you tell, someone else in the family, it was like, well, what did you do wrong? And what was your role in it? And I would love to kind of change that mentality and that mindset. It should never be that. If someone's reporting something to you that they say has happened to them, why do we always result to kind of blaming and guilt shaming the victim or the survivor of the situation? So I think even I would love to see some work around really kind of changing those social norms and those mindsets too.
Absolutely. And we definitely see a need for education. So as an example of this, and April's not only Victim Rights Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month, but it's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I asked the city of Taunton for data as far as how many reports they had in 2023 of police response to sexual assault. And I wasn't able to get last year's data, but I got 2022 data. And what I was told was that there were 22 reports of sexual assault in Taunton for that year. Now, I gave that information to some community providers, and the response was, oh, that's great. We only had 22. Well, what's not being told from that story is how many of these sexual assaults are being unreported. And then on top of that, how many people who identify as Black, Indigenous, people of color are not seeking out any kind of assistance from the police or from the community. And that shows us that we need to be doing a better job of educating around this. We need to be doing a better job with the police response. And we also need to show people that this is a big problem, that these numbers don't accurately reflect the situation on the ground. And we need to make sure that if these sexual assaults are not reported, that these people are able to get the help that they need through agencies like New Hope or other providers.
There is a question, and I see April's typing an answer, so I don't know if you want to verbally answer it, but it is, could you speak about the specific policy agendas that the Taunton Diversity Network in this project are supporting?
Yeah, so there's not a specific policy right now that we're supporting. If there are specific things that come our way that we feel is aligned with our goals and our mission, then we will certainly sign on to support it. Things that we've supported in the past was the moratorium on building another women's prison was one of the policies that we kind of signed on and supported in the past. We have been advocating for and really working towards some efforts around Black maternal health and the disparities that come along with that. And then we also have a period poverty project, which we've implemented, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, where we do collect, hygiene items and we provide them to after school programs, elementary schools, anyone who has a business that's willing to host a basket, then we provide supplies for them. But it's my understanding around the same time that we started the period poverty project, then the state of Massachusetts did put forward a bill that required them to provide sanitary products in schools for free for students. So that was great for the schools, but we know that it goes your menstrual goes beyond just your school day. So we have a period closet that we keep well stocked for anyone in the community that needs it. But those are pretty much the things that we've signed on for recently. But again, as policies and things come our way, if they fit with our mission and our vision, then we certainly will sign on to support it.
And April, I've noticed too that legislators in Taunton are paying more attention to priorities that the Taunton Diversity Network has. Where originally they would go into session and just vote however, that they feel, but now their relationship with the Taunton Diversity Network is bringing this other perspective in and helping them really look at things in a different way through a different lens that would end up helping to benefit people who don't identify as white.
Correct. And that's one thing that we've heard numerous times from, our city councilors, our state representatives, and even our congressmen, that they're able to get a different perspective, because even though, Black and brown people are going out to vote, they're not necessarily taking the time all the time to sit down and have conversations with our leaders on a regular basis and give them some insight and some perspective on some things. Sometimes we just come off as being angry and say, well, we're mad about this and we want to protest about that and we want answers. But we sometimes need to provide our white counterparts with some context, right? Some background. Why are we upset? What does this mean? How can they approach it differently? And so we are taking the time to have those tough conversations. We are taking the time to kind of call out people when they're not, using proper language, or they're saying something that's offensive that maybe they've said this all their life. Maybe they never even knew it was offensive, or that it was even an area of concern. You know how many people have said to us, we never even thought about period poverty. Like who would ever think of something like that? But it's like, if you have a family, again, that's a low income family, and they have, maybe a mother and a daughter, or multiple daughters, or, multiple menstruating individuals, I'll say, let me correct my language. You have, a cost that's not easy to always manage, right? And it's taxed, which is crazy to us. And so being able to provide something as simple as that to keep people from having infections and, you know, other health issues that come along with not being able to properly take care of your menstrual hygiene is one thing that we hope can make a small dent in a bigger problem. So we love the fact that we can have these tough conversations with our leadership, and the hope, wish, and desire is that we'll, you know, get some more people in leadership that are, you know, from different populations, so that our pool of candidates looks a little more diverse than what it is now.
And I want to say too that the work of the Taunton Diversity Network has been really instrumental, because in the past year or two, we've seen so many new arrivals come into the city of Taunton. And it's been really important for TDN to educate around these different perspectives so that they can help support these new arrivals in the best ability that they can, so that they understand the issues that might arise, and some of the barriers that exist for them as well.
Well, thank you all for sharing and sort of for adding some of that additional information. We don't have any other questions, so I think we'll sort of wrap it up there, unless any of you have final thoughts. But I just want to thank all three of you again for being here, for doing this work, and for sharing the work with all of us. And thank everyone in attendance for being here with us today as well. I'm going to send an email to all in attendance after this, probably this afternoon, with a PDF of the slides, the recording, and an evaluation link, which Brenna just dropped in the chat as well. And we're having some other webinars throughout the month for Victim Rights Month. It's also Sexual Assault Awareness Month and Child Abuse Prevention Month. So I'll include the link to those in the follow-up email as well. But just sincere gratitude to Christine, Chastity, and April, and to all of you. And I hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Can we just share the flyer at the end of the
Yes,
PowerPoint?
so if we have any, let me try and do this here. Here we go. If we have anybody in our audience who live, work, or are actively involved in the Taunton area, we would love to invite you to be able to take part in our community needs assessment survey. So the QR code and the URL is there. Participants will be entered into a gift card raffle. And alternatively, if you have some feedback but do not desire to take the survey, you are more than welcome to contact our colleague Jessica at Collective Capacity to be able to complete a brief interview. We'd really appreciate as much feedback as possible around this. And maybe you don't live or work or have significant investment in the Taunton community, but if you know anyone who does, please send them the survey. Everyone who meets those requirements are welcome to take it. It would really help us out a lot.
All right. Thank you all again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Yeah.